which stats do we need? Which stats do we not need? Is there too much or too little of a certain stat? Is there a perfect value for a certain stat? First, I'd like to go over all the stats that have a linear scaling, which means there is no perfect value per se, and it's pretty much situation driven. When I'm talking about linear stats, I'm talking about base damage, I'm talking about health, I'm talking about health regeneration, movement speed, rage points. These are stats that have a linear scaling, which means the value that you gain doesn't change depending on the amount that you already have. In respect to what you have, yeah, it makes a bigger difference if you go from 1 million to 2 million HP than it would going from 4 million to 5 million HP. But the 1 million HP is still worth 1 million HP. It negates 1 million damage. So in that regard, it's linearly scaling. And that's what I mean when talking about linear stats. These stats are pretty much get as much as you want. If you are looking at specific things, you just want to have enough for the situation. So killing a boss in 5 seconds, you probably don't need more damage. If you have 13 movement speed, yeah, you don't need more movement speed. That's the cap. You can't get more. Rage points, if you have or mana, if you have a certain amount or more, it just depends on how much you really need. If you notice that you have too little while playing, that's something that you need to look into. Though this is pretty limited on where you can get it from. And yeah, health regeneration, same thing. It's just health that you get every second. The more the better, I guess, but there's not really a way to stack it anymore, especially since the actual health regeneration enchantment on items was removed quite a while ago. So yeah, unfortunately, this is pretty much a stat that you don't care at all for. It just exists. You have other ways of healing. Attack speed is also a linear stat, but it has a little bit more of a mechanic to it. So we're going to take a look at that separately. All the other stats in the game are exponentially scaling. What it means is at a certain point, the value you get from having more is greater than the value than if you were to get that same value at a lower amount of that stat. One of the best ways to show this is critical value. Critical value is your #1 priority. Whenever you're playing a new character, you want to pump this stat as fast as possible. The goal for you is to have 451,000 crit during combat because, as you can see in the middle of the tooltip, it says, based on your current critical value, a critical hit deals 449.52 additional damage. Now the max for this is actually 500. But if I just enter any map really quick and proc all of the buffs that I have, so for a warrior, this is the Furious Battle Cry, and it would also be the Jewel of Rage. Jewel of Rage is very important. So if I proc all of these, as you can see, I'm now at 456,000. My crit is maxed out at 500%. And as you can also see, at the very bottom, it says crit against level 145 opponents on Parallel World Bloodshed. There we go. All right, I need to proc this as well. All right, 80%. That's what we want. 451,000 crit is 80% on Bloodshed, and 441,000 crit is the amount you need for 500% critical damage. So this is the value that you want to go for. But 441,000 is the least amount of crit you need to have, and 451,000 is the absolute maximum you need to have. So I actually have too much crit on this character. So now we know how this works. But what about the rest? Attack speed is the second most important stat right after crit. I don't care how much damage you have. Like, I literally do not care. If you don't have crit and you don't have the attack speed at the right breaking points, it just doesn't matter, right? Your damage is going to be so much lower. You can run around with 80,000 damage and clear Parallel World merciless if you have enough crit and attack speed. That's pretty much it. Grant you, it's going to take a little bit longer than if you had more damage, but you can do it. It's absolutely perfectly doable. Attack speed is done at reaching 4.0. Once you reach 4.0, you unlock a new ability through attack speed. So at the very bottom of the attack speed tooltip, it says attacks per seconds are capped at 4.0. So this means any further attack speed value will not give you higher animation breakpoints. Your attacks are not going to appear faster. But what it does is they will grant you stacks of battle anger. When 100 stacks have been reached, you will then unleash rage, receive the unleashed rage buff, which will increase your damage by 100%. And underneath that, you see next bonus will be unlocked with attack speed 5.5. Currently, it says the attacks per second grant 3 stacks, or 3 stack actually. It's not translated properly. So if I take these off, it says grant 1 stack. And the next bonus will be unlocked with attack speed 4.5. Every 0.5 attack speed after 4.0 will give you an additional stack with each attack. All right, so if I were to equip this, I would have 7.9 attack speed. I get 6 stacks of battle anger per attack. Actually, the warrior's kind of bugged, so it does it even if I don't hit anything. As you can see, I get 6 stacks if this gets fixed because of this video. Don't blame me. Yeah, this is 6 stacks for every attack. And now we have the damage buff. Plus 100% damage. But why didn't my damage double? What happened there? The 100% extra damage is not applied to the entire damage, but to the relative modifier. So this buff is still very strong. It is very, very good. You want to have this, but it is not ×2 damage. Just keep that in mind. Most buffs work like that. If it's plus 100%, plus 50%, plus 200%, I think the Big Game Hunt set has something like that. Yeah, plus 200%. Then it does add to the relative modifier. As you can see, it's 167% right now. We're going to attack a little bit. And there we go. It's 267% now. Perfect. That's kind of why they're so important. And damage doesn't matter as much early on, because these scale exponentially. If you crit more often and you crit for higher numbers, the higher values of crit are just worth way more. Now, block value is equal to crit. Same idea. So you can see the current block strength is 1.42. Incoming damage will be reduced by 29.4. So having low crit, literally low block does nothing. High block, insanely strong. That's how it works. Same thing as crit. Now for the resistances. The resistances are the only stats that we've not really talked about, and they work in the same way that they are stronger the more you have. If you take 100 damage and you have 50% resistance to that damage type, then you will receive only 50 damage, which means the damage that you now receive is 50. Keep that in mind. If we were to increase our resistance to, let's say, 60%, and we still take 100 damage, 60% resistance, so we only take 40 actual damage, we now decreased the damage that we received from 50 down to 40. That is a 20% difference. Same thing if we went from 60% resistance all the way up to 80, which is a 20% difference in the resistance value itself, like a 20% point difference instead of the first 60 percentage points that you gained. You will now receive 20 damage instead of 40, so you halved your damage again. That is why it is capped at 80. Anything above 80 would make us borderline immortal, which we aren't already, kinda, right? That is why these values are stronger the more you have. If there are possibilities to really build into them, that might be interesting. So I personally could look into swapping out one of my health items for a resistance item. I'd have to do just try it, I guess. See how good that would be, how much resistance I can get out of there, how much the resistance is worth. These values are just better the more you have. What you see right here is actually just the wisdom resistance. That's 43,600 plus. These resistances are pretty much just the resistance that you get through the defense tree and the wisdom talent. It's pretty good if that amount is already 60%, 50 to 60%, depending on the class. Just take that for sure, because as I said, if you have these choices right here, armor, resistance, which are technically the same, this is just physical resistance, and block value, just a little bit of block value doesn't do much, but these, they do way more. So of course you're just going to put 40 points in here and 80 in the others, right? So now this makes sense why we're taking this. That's how it works. The higher the better. In some cases, if you're below a certain point, it's pretty much useless. So if you're trying to go from 20 to 30% in resistances, don't bother. Just play the game. At this point, health is way more interesting to you. Things like that should be clear now. If you have any questions regarding stats or want to correct anything I've said, please feel free to tell me. I will welcome your criticism.